Hello, this video provides an overview and analysis of the first act of the play Hamlet. The opening scene of Hamlet plunges us into an atmosphere of paranoia. Francisco, Bernardo, and Marcellus are conducting the night's watch on the ramparts of the castle Elsinore. The darkness makes it difficult for them to identify each other, and they challenge each other to reveal their identities. When Horatio, who we will later learn is Hamlet's best friend, joins them, he introduces himself into the story by saying something strange. Is Horatio there? Bernardo asks. A piece of him, Horatio famously replies, suggesting that personal identity is not as straightforward as the soldiers think. A person can be, and maybe always is, there and not there, themselves and not themselves, at the same time. The soldiers have good reason to be on edge, for they have been witnesses to a very dramatic instance of a figure that seems to be themselves and not themselves at the same time, the ghost of King Hamlet, the recently deceased King of Denmark. The ghost violates the boundaries that we assume exist between life and death, between being and not being. The appearance of the ghost suggests that the nature of the world and reality and even life and death themselves are not what we thought they were, not what they appear to be, that they are shot through with mystery and absence. Horatio has been to college, so the soldiers think he might have learned something about what ghosts are and how to talk to them, and they are right. Horatio is skeptical at first, but when the ghost appears, he is impressed enough to be convinced. What does the ghost mean? Well, Horatio explains that the ghost's appearance might be connected to another reason that the soldiers of the Night's Watch have a good reason to be jumpy, because their country is preparing for an imminent invasion by Fortinbras, the crown prince of Norway, who is threatening to march on Denmark and take back lands that King Hamlet had won from Fortinbras's father in battle. This backstory may remind us of the narrative atmosphere of Beowulf, where Norwegians and Danes were also always raiding and pillaging each other in a multi-generational cycle of tribal violence. Horatio speculates that maybe King Hamlet's ghost is stalking the castle because it is perturbed by all the military preparations underway. Maybe it's an omen that the Danish kingdom is going to collapse. Maybe it's a sign that we're all doomed. The political dread of war and invasion becomes associated with the ontological dread of the ghost, the dread that reality itself is being invaded by a specter of death and disaster. Horatio thinks they should tell King Hamlet's son, Prince Hamlet, about what they saw. This opening scene not only gets the plot rolling with the appearance of the ghost, but it also establishes an overall narrative atmosphere of looming tragedy, while also foregrounding the theme of the often slippery relationship between appearance and reality, both as it relates to other people, to personal identity, as well as to the physical world itself. In the second scene of Act 1, we meet Hamlet and his screwy family. First, there's Hamlet's paternal uncle and new stepdad, Claudius. Claudius is addressing a roomful of courtiers about various matters of state, starting off with how he wants everyone to feel about the fact that he just married his dead brother's wife to make himself king. His take on the whole situation is that you can be happy and sad at the same time, and everyone should just get over it. He also dismisses the military threat from young Fortinbras and grants Laertes leave to go to France. You can tell by the way Claudius talks that he really likes being king. He likes speechifying and making decisions and lording his authority over his sycophantic retainers. He likes being in his brother's place and sleeping with his sister-in-law and sitting on his throne. Everything seems to be going great for Claudius. But there's one black fly in Claudius's ointment, one recalcitrant little bee in his bonnet. It's Hamlet, of course, who sulks and pouts and scowls while everyone else is clapping and laughing. Claudius has no choice but to try to welcome Hamlet into the festivities. He addresses him, "My cousin Hamlet, and my son." Of course, being called "my son" by his new stepfather makes Hamlet cringe, so he mutters his first line, "a little more than kin, and less than kind," meaning that it's incestuous and unnatural that his uncle is also his father, that's too much kinship, and also that he feels that he is a different kind of person from his hideous uncle/stepfather, and also that he registers a mutual lack of kindness in their relationship. For all Claudius's display of magnanimous paternity, the truth is that they hate each other. All of these meanings are embedded in Hamlet's famous first line. But what we learn most importantly of all, perhaps, is that Hamlet is the kind of person who can mutter 9 words and then keep an army of literary critics up for 5 centuries trying to unpack the bottomless levels of meaning in what he said. Claudius and Hamlet's mother, Gertrude, work on Hamlet together to try to cheer him up. Sure, it's one thing to be sad that your dad died. It's another thing to take your bereavement so far that you have to dress in black and look like you're going to cry all the time for months and months. Claudius has a lot of reasons why Hamlet should just cheer up. It's unmanly. It's against God's plan. People die all the time. It's not really a big deal. Life is great. I'm going to go drink myself silly and have sex with your mom. Good talk, nephew/stepson. And then Hamlet is left alone, and he starts talking to himself, which in a Shakespeare play is called a soliloquy. This is where we get to hear what's really in his heart. He doesn't have to be polite or pretend like he's making an unsuccessful effort to act polite. So what's up, Hamlet? What's really going on in your heart? Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. Oh, you want to melt, to simply liquefy out of existence. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter. Oh, you would kill yourself if suicide wasn't prohibited by God. How weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Hamlet goes on to explain how disgusted he is by the fact that his mom hooked up with his uncle. In his depiction of events, his father was a Hyperion, a Hercules, the perfect father and husband and king in every way. This idealized memory of his father has been produced, mocked, and trampled upon by the behavior of his mother and uncle. This is not just a family drama, it is an existential one. Hamlet's faith in love, family, motherhood, womanhood, and marriage has been violated, and with it, his faith in the value of life itself. What is the point of living in a world where the very things you thought were perfect and pure are mocked in the most carnal and vulgar ways? Hamlet is grappling with these difficult feelings when Horatio and the guards arrive to give him their news. We saw the ghost of your father. Now the paranoid atmosphere evoked in the first scene of the play suddenly converges with the more intimate paranoia Hamlet suffers regarding his relationship with his own family. While Hamlet was seeing images of his dead father in his mind's eye, Horatio and the watchmen were seeing his ghostly apparition, as if Hamlet's paranoid personal fantasies about his own family are being projected out into the reality of the world of the play. And of course, whereas Horatio thought that the ghost of King Hamlet might be here to tell them something about the imminent military clash marching down on Elsinore, the ghost is really here on much more personal business. Scene 3 of Act 1 gives us a break from the ghost story to introduce us to another family, the family of Polonius, an advisor to Claudius, and his two children, his son Laertes, who is returning to France to go back to college, and his daughter Ophelia. Everyone seems to know that Ophelia and Hamlet have been spending a lot of time together lately, and Laertes and Polonius both spend most of this scene lecturing to Ophelia about how she shouldn't date Hamlet. He's going to be king of Denmark. You're just a random girl. It will never work out, and even if it seems like it's working out now, it will inevitably end badly. A king has to marry someone for political reasons. They can't get distracted by personal feelings. One gets the sense that Laertes and Polonius are also very possessive of Ophelia and want to monopolize her affection for themselves. Ophelia doesn't get to say too much because she is always being talked at and shamed for being a silly girl who can't be trusted to make sound romantic decisions for herself. In addition to providing important narrative information, this scene also presents a parallel family dynamic to the Hamlet Claudius Gertrude family. Here is another family where fraught sexual tensions cause us to search for hidden motives and sidewise meanings in the way the characters talk to one another. It's not just Hamlet's family, the scene suggests. All families, whether they are royal families or not, are all dysfunctional in their own ways. The most famous part of this scene is Polonius's long-winded speech to Laertes, culminating in the advice, "To thine own self be true." If Polonius were a Chaucer character, we would know how to feel about him, how much we were supposed to think of him as a wise, if flawed, loving father, and how much we were supposed to think of him as a tedious windbag. Shakespeare, amazingly, allows Polonius to be both of these things at once. So even while he's reciting his tiresome windbag lecture, he fills it with sound advice and beautiful sentiments. The interpretation is left to different actors playing the part, and if you see enough versions of Hamlet, you will observe a full spectrum of Poloniuses, from the wise counselor to the craven buffoon, and everything in between. That's one of the reasons why reading the play is better than seeing any one production, because all of these Poloniuses magically coexist in the text itself. In scene 4, Horatio and the night watchman take Hamlet to go meet the ghost. On the way to the castle battlements, they can hear the cannon going off, and Hamlet explains that that's something that Claudius likes to do. Every time Claudius takes a shot at one of his drinking parties, he orders a cannon to be shot off as a way of amplifying and celebrating his boorish, drunken behavior. Hamlet's disgust for his uncle/stepfather wanders off into a reflection on the way some people who might otherwise be fine and perfectly normal people suffer from the effects of a vicious mole of nature, some disfigurement in their soul that sours all of their possibilities and makes their lives tragic and doomed. Of course, critics have often assumed that Hamlet has wandered away from talking about Claudius and is now talking about his own vicious mole, his own tragic flaw. It's interesting how Hamlet, almost unconsciously, seems to detect some kind of connection between himself and his loathed uncle. Maybe his uncle isn't even really to blame for what an awful person he is, since anyone can fall under the influence of their own personal vicious mole of nature. Maybe it doesn't even make sense to blame people for their sins, since we're all just victims of the people we happen to be. And then the ghost is there, as if answering in some way to Hamlet's inner speculations. Toward the end of the act, Hamlet will refer to the ghost as a mole. Horatio warns Hamlet that the ghost might be here to kill him, but we already know that Hamlet is suicidal anyway, so he doesn't care. He breaks away from the rest of the group and follows the ghost into scene 5. Hamlet's dad is in hell, or maybe purgatory, but they let him out at night so that he can wander the earth and try to get his son to avenge his murder. That's right, just as Hamlet had dimly suspected, and maybe as the audience had guessed as well, Claudius killed Hamlet's father with deadly ear poison while the king was sleeping in his garden. He died so quickly that there was no time for confession, last rites, or extreme unction, see Everyman. So now he's condemned to the underworld to be tortured until his sins are purged away. Hamlet's dad has violated the border between this world and the next in order to impart this sacred obligation to Hamlet. Avenge me! Hamlet has his marching orders. After the ghost disappears in the morning light, Hamlet is crazed with resolution. I knew my uncle was a creep. Now I have evidence from beyond the grave. I have one thing to do. Go kill Claudius. We all carry swords around here, so all I have to do is go over to where he's passed out drunk and stab the bastard through the heart. Simple. So, uncle, there you are. Now to my word. Maybe we won't even need an act 3. Am I right? When Horatio and the gang come back into the scene, Hamlet's behavior suddenly starts to go from resolute and committed to batty and deranged. When they ask him what happened, he responds with evasions, jokes, platitudes, and outright nonsense. He asks them to swear not to tell anyone about the ghost, and when the ghost's voice returns to command the men to make the pledge, Hamlet is no longer full of reverence and dread, but laughs and makes fun of the ghost. This is where he makes the mole comment, referring to the ghost as if he were a theatrical effect, which of course he is. And when the men, in terror, agree to make the pledge, Hamlet's version of the pledge is a comic babble of verbiage that an actor can play as stuttering terror, ecstatic whimsy, or a wholesale breakdown in the character's composure. Here is where critics start arguing about whether Hamlet has suddenly gone mad, or whether he has been going mad all along and this is the breaking point, or whether Hamlet is shrewdly working to confuse and befuddle the people around him into thinking he's mad, or whether he's using madness as a disguise to conceal the fact that he's actually going crazy, or even whether the encounter with the otherworldly entity has disrupted and shattered Hamlet's personality. After the men swear to keep Hamlet's secret, the prince seems to calm down a little, renewing his commitment to follow through on his mission to kill Claudius and avenge his father. But by this point in the play, we know enough to distrust appearances. The craziness is just getting started.